Let me tell you how I went from being the heir to a billion-dollar empire to scrubbing toilets with a mop that smelled like old rainwater and somehow finding the only real thing I ever wanted, right in the dirt. Yeah, sounds nuts, but buckle up because it happened and it changed everything I thought I knew about power, trust, and what makes someone actually worth loving. You ever seen your hero turn small? My dad, Chief Damien, was the toughest man in Africa. You just don't cross a guy like him. Not in the boardroom, not on the street, not anywhere. But cancer? It doesn't care who you are. Watching him fade, his hands shaking on the bed sheets, hit me harder than any heartbreak, any betrayal. He looked at me, eyes wet, voice a whisper, and said he wasn't afraid to die, just afraid I'd be left alone in a world full of men who'd either prey on me or try to use me for what he built. Let that sit for a second. He didn't want an empire for a trophy. He wanted to know I'd find someone to guard it with me, not just for the crown. Thing is, I'd spent years with men who only wanted the money, the name, the photos, you know the type. Nobody wanted the real me, and I'd given up thinking anyone ever would. But in that moment, squeezing my dad's hand, I promised him I'd marry someone worthy of both our names. Not out of duty, but because I wanted to give him peace. Sometimes you make promises in pain, and those are the ones that change your life. So, how do you find out who's real when everyone knows you as the boss's daughter? You disappear. For real. I dropped the heels, the weaves, every shiny thing that made me stand out. I signed into my dad's company as Zanab Musa, zero connections, no degree, just another broke girl looking for work. They stuck me on cleaning duty, 5 a.m., call times, scrubbing marble floors I used to strut on, and trust me, nobody cared who I was. Suddenly, all the masks fell off. People said things around me they'd never say if they knew my last name. It was like being given a front row ticket to the ugliest movie about human nature. Some folks ignore me completely. Others threw words like knives. These cleaners always smell like poverty. Charming, right? Sometimes I'd see execs use us as errand girls, or worse, you wouldn't believe how some guys act when they think you've got nowhere to go. I laughed it off, played dumb, took mental notes. Because the more invisible I became, the more they revealed embezzlement, blackmail, straight-up bribes. I'd watch men in suits joke about cleaning up the company 1 minute, then sneak files out the back the next. But you know what's funny? Some of the worst offenders were the ones who smiled at me, called me dear, offered to help me get ahead. I learned real fast. The sweet ones often had the sharpest teeth. There were a couple who treated me like a human dentist, head of ops, would always nod, sometimes help with the heavy stuff, never cross the line. He was calm, collected, maybe too perfect, if I'm being honest. I didn't trust anybody, but I couldn't help noticing him. And then came the twist. The deeper I went, the more I found out about the rot inside the company. Board members plotting, managers stealing, interns being used. And in the middle of it all, dentists never dirty, always just a little too nice. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was the real deal. But one night, I heard him on the phone, didn't know I was there plotting to take down my father as soon as he died. Files ready, allies lined up. My heart sank, but I kept my cool. Had to play along, smile, pretend I didn't know, because if I blew my cover now, he'd just vanish and start over somewhere else. I kept digging, heart breaking a little more every day. Then a weird thing happened. I started noticing another cleaner chike. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. He'd help people when nobody was watching, never gossiped, never asked for anything. He'd risk his own job to leave anonymous tips about corruption, real anonymous, not the let me get a promotion kind. His whole vibe was, if the wicked win, we all lose. It hit me. This was the kind of person my dad always talked about, someone who'd fight for what's right, not for applause. Slowly, I started trusting Chike, testing him without him knowing. Every time I nudged for info, he had it. He'd figured out which elevator the thieves used because it had a broken camera, how certain managers moved stolen files, which board member was ready to sell out the company. No drama, no ego, just facts and quiet loyalty. The more I saw, the more I realized loyalty doesn't always come from above. Sometimes it comes from the basement. We worked together to catch the bad guys, setting up hidden cameras, baiting them into meetings, recording their plans. The whole operation felt like a movie hard in my throat, praying nobody saw us plant that camera or overheard Chike feeding a rumor to lure the crooks into a trap. Finally, we caught Dennis and the others, full confession, faces on camera, all of it. My dad came back to the company, frail but fierce, and played the footage at a board meeting that went from polite to total chaos in about 3 minutes. Security hauled Dennis and his crew out, and my dad turned to me, nodded, gave me that look proud but tired like, "You did it." But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was facing Chike after I revealed who I really was. He thought I'd played him, used him as just another pawn. He walked away, crushed, and I couldn't blame him. All I wanted was to tell him the truth, but the truth, when you drop it too late, feels just like betrayal. I tried to find him, showing up at his mom's place with nothing but an apology and my broken heart in my hands. He listened, but hurt runs deep, you know? It was my dad, the dying king, who stepped in, went to Chike's house, and said, "I trust you with my daughter and my legacy." No speech, no demands, just a father's plea. That's the moment things shifted. Chike found me on the rooftop, where we used to talk about hope and justice and why we both hated fancy boardrooms. He told me he still loved the girl who scrubbed floors beside him, not the heiress. I told him I'd rather sweep with him than run a company alone. We got married right there on that rooftop. Nothing fancy, just us, my dad, his wheelchair, a few friends, and the city lights. 2 weeks later, my dad passed, but not before leaving us a letter. Legacies aren't built by wealth, but by people who carry light in dark rooms. Make it better. Make it honest. Make it yours. And that's what we did. Chike became director, not because I loved him, but because he earned it. The board was cleaned out, the culture changed from the inside, and every year we go back to that rooftop and tell new staff about the time the cleaners saved the company. So, yeah, money can buy you power, but it can't buy you loyalty. That has to be earned usually in the places nobody's looking. The lesson? Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you needed to find the one thing you can't live without. You know what I mean? Now I want to hear from you. When is deception justified? And where's the line between testing people and betraying them? What would you have done in my shoes? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, love, and whether power corrupts or if it just reveals who we always were underneath.